Elizabeth Bennet, my home, my family, my thoughts. Sometimes I think all my happiness and all my anxieties begin beneath this roof, where noise, talk, quarrels, and laughter rule the day. We are 5 sisters, so different that at times it seems fate decided to gather every possible kind of young woman under one roof. Jane is an angel of kindness and gentleness. When she looks at a person, he remembers there is more light in him than he supposed. Mary lives among her books and improving maxims, which she reads aloud with a serious air, as if virtue itself had asked for the floor. Her solemnity can be tiring, but I know it sits upon earnest effort. Kitty and Lydia are a whirl of gowns, ribbons, and laughter, endless giggles hiding a child's carelessness and a hunger to be noticed. Mamma's concern for our future turns every scrap of news into a reason for alarm, and every day into a bustle. Inside all that fuss is love, only she expresses it loudly and in her own fashion. Papa sees everything, but prefers the shelter of his library, irony just touching his lips. His calm can look like detachment, yet in difficult moments it anchors us. And still I love them all, strangenesses, fears, weaknesses, and all. In the evening I sit at the window with a book and hear the familiar house noise drift through the rooms. The rustle of skirts, the click of knitting needles, cups against saucers, a stair that always creaks, distant laughter in the corridor. The air smells of tea, warm bread, and a little of the hearth's smoke. There are moments I close my eyes and think, how good that life was given to me exactly so, full of sounds, faces, and feelings. We are not perfect, but we are alive. When word ran through the neighborhood that a wealthy gentleman, Mr. Bingley, had taken Netherfield Park, the very air seemed to lift. People talked faster, and the footpaths to Netherfield grew shorter. Mamma walked the house making plans, sorting our best gowns in her mind, and predicting which of us would be fortunate. Papa, half laughing, hid behind the bookbacks, and from that fortress sent out calm but pointed observations. I looked at Jane. A quiet light had visited her face. Her goodness is more than beauty. There is a softness in her that asks for no reward. I wished her happiness, and, confession, I was curious too. Who was this neighbor around whom such a stir had risen? We first saw Mr. Bingley at the Meryton assembly, and at once understood why people spoke of him with such pleasure. He is attentive and amiable, and takes delight in the delight of others, a rare gift. Beside him stood his friend, Mr. Darcy, tall, handsome, exceedingly reserved. He would enter a room and the room seemed to grow quieter, not from fear, but from a slight sense of distance, as if he were a portrait in a heavy frame not yet introduced to a living house. Jane danced with Mr. Bingley and looked wonderfully well, as anyone does when someone else is caring for them tenderly. As for me, they contrived to have me make up a set with his friend, or rather, to have him invite me. He refused. She is tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me, he said evenly, believing I could not hear. I smiled. There was nothing else to be done. Laughter is a light shield against a small hurt. But the prick remained. I told myself I would forget, and did not, of course. Still, I caught myself thinking of him more often than I wished. There was something unsaid in his coldness, as if a door were closed and a fire burned behind it that he would not let be seen. Later, as we watched Jane's carriage drive away and counted the days until the next invitation to Netherfield, I noticed something else. Mr. Darcy's eyes came back to me more than once, not haughty but inquiring, as if he were himself displeased to find that he noticed me again. Soon the officers came to Meryton, scarlet coats, easy jokes, news told with a smile. Among them was Mr. Wickham, a free stride, gentle speech, and open look. He was easily received everywhere, as if chairs were moved aside for him beforehand. That very day he met Mr. Darcy in the street. They exchanged bows, short, like dry lines at the end of a letter. For a moment both faces hardened. Nothing happened. It was precisely that nothing that told too much. I marked the strangeness, and I suppose was ready to believe any explanation that confirmed my wounded sense of justice. The explanation presented itself quickly. That evening at Aunt Phillips's, the talk turned to the past of its own accord. Mr. Wickham did not complain. He merely spoke, "Since you ask," and that reluctance was his strength. The picture seemed plain, he the injured, the other proud and unjust. I listened and felt anger rise in me. So Mr. Darcy's coldness was not mere manner, but a habit that could hurt. I hesitated to repeat what I had heard, yet the story found its own path into conversation. The more I thought of it, the more persistently Mr. Darcy annoyed me, and the more readily I welcomed any detail that fit the pattern of my offense. What an insufferable man! Meanwhile, Mr. Wickham had a talent for being exactly what one wished to see. Delicate, attentive, unburdened by too much seriousness. Now, looking back, I see I was listening not only to words, but to my own pride. At the time, I fancied I was merely separating truth from pretense. While the neighborhood discussed our new acquaintance, another guest rolled into our drive, Mr. Collins, our cousin, and the future heir to Longbourn. His compliments sounded as if learned from a manual. His bows to rank came so often they became a rite. It soon grew clear that the object of his industry was myself. His attentions were awkward and insistent. They marched rather than walked, crowding the small spaces where one expects to keep breath and quiet. I laughed. I blushed. I caught myself on irritation, yet I tried to be fair. He is not a cruel man, only trained to worship order rather than feeling. When the proposal came, I refused at once, and still a chill drew through my chest. I knew the cost of that no. Our house is not ours, but his. Should anything happen to my father, we must go. Mamma was angry and in tears, weighing prudence and the future. Papa, scarcely raising his eyes, gave me the right to be myself with a single nod. I understood Charlotte Lucas when she accepted him soon after. Her choice was sober. She looked honestly at life and at the account in the purse. To judge her would have been easy and unkind. I could not follow. Something in me stubbornly refused to live without respect for my own feeling. Meanwhile, the understanding between Jane and Mr. Bingley unfolded gently and bright, until the day Netherfield was abruptly shut up, and her hopes folded like a letter left unsealed. She bore it beautifully. Her dignity is a quiet that requires no witnesses. I was angry. At fate, at invisible influences, at Mr. Darcy himself, who was suspected of cool advice. I tried to push him out of my thoughts like a splinter, but memory stubbornly returned me to him. Now to the chilly bow at the assembly, now to Mr. Wickham's impeccable civility. Then chance began to throw us together in life as well. A meeting on a path, a brief exchange in a neighbor's parlor, a glance held a moment longer than I could decipher. And still, when he declared himself, I could not believe what I heard. His words were both confession and sting. Between the lines they said, despite my circle, my connections, my family. I answered as I felt, sharply, bitterly, honestly. I accused him of cruelty to Wickham, of breaking Jane's happiness, of despising my relations. I burned with rightness and did not see that somewhere inside that rightness lay a shadow of pride. I unfolded his letter at dawn. The room still smelt of candle. The window pane was cold, and the birds were only beginning to answer one another in the garden. I swallowed the lines first like bitter medicine. The meaning burned, but did not yet open. The second reading slowed the words, as if the paper had grown heavier. The third, then I heard no longer a stranger's voice, but facts arranging themselves into a clear and inconvenient picture. Mr. Wickham's story proved otherwise. Not misfortune, but calculation. Not generosity, but the habit of living on credit, monetary and moral. Where I had seen injury, there stood dexterity. Where I had heard gentle complaint, there was a skilled plea to be believed. Of Georgiana, he wrote with such care and respect that I was ashamed of my credulity. I had been charmed by a smooth voice and a handsome presentation. I learnt how easy it is to mistake soft speech for truth when it relieves the ache of an old slight. Of Jane, he wrote plainly. He had misread her reserve and feared unequal affection. The admission hurt, and yet restored my sister to me. Her quiet love was too delicate for crude measurements. I had excused my heat by saying I defended Jane. Yet behind my words stood pride, too. I like to think myself a reader of hearts at a glance. Hearts do not care to be skimmed, they wish to be known. Shame is an unpleasant companion, but a useful one. With it I walked through my memories as through the house with a lamp. Some corners proved lighter than I had known, others darker. I noticed what I had missed. How Papa's irony can cut. How Mamma's anxiety is merely a different language of love. How Kitty copies Lydia from fear of being left in the shadow. Having looked closer at my own, I could not help looking again at him. Mr. Darcy. I did not forgive. I grew attentive. And knowledge does not become habit at once. It needs time to settle, like snow on the branches. The journey with my aunt and Uncle Gardner gave me the rest I needed. The road draws one's thoughts out into a straight thread. We drove along warm, dusty lanes. The hedges smelt of grass. The brooks were cool. The tea at the inns tasted better than at home. My uncle talked of factories and fairs. My aunt of children and fashions. Their composure was a cure. When we found ourselves not far from Pemberley, the suggestion to stop sounded simple, almost matter of fact. I agreed only because I was certain the master was away. A house is not the man. I was ready to see the house. Pemberley received us with dignity without display. The housekeeper spoke of her master with a warmth that cannot be bought, and it moved me more than gilt frames ever could. Then he appeared. There was no haste in him, and no coldness either. Only a clear embarrassment and a wish to be courteous. Suddenly I felt as awkward as a schoolgirl when she discovers she is looked upon kindly and is not prepared for it. We spoke of simple things. How long the heat had lasted that year. What music his sister loved. Which path was easiest to the summer house. Simple words proved safer than polished ones. It is easier not to hide in them. Georgiana was a separate pleasure to me. Her shyness was not fretfulness, but carefulness. Beside her brother she unfolded quietly, like a flower in sunlight. I thought, a man beside whom children and the timid feel safe cannot be the cold judge I had drawn in my mind. We walked the avenues and were silent at times, not emptily, but in trust. I fancied I could hear the house breathe in Pemberley, evenly. The ease of Pemberley did not last. In Lambton a letter from Jane found us, few lines, and alarm in every one. Lydia had run away. Shame, fear, despair. Longbourn hummed with talk. Mamma was exhausted by tears and orders, Papa quieter than usual, collected. The house rang with anxiety. Who would now think of marrying any of us? My father went to London. We waited for letters. Each bird's song at dawn sounded like the beginning of bad news. And yes, a thought came that shamed me. Had I accepted Mr. Collins, we might at least have had a roof and fewer reasons for ill tongues. No, I heard that thought and pushed it away. Life without respect for oneself is no shelter. It is a shadow. When at last the news arrived that they had been found, that there would be a marriage and the terms were settled, relief did not become simple joy. A marriage made of necessity looks like a bandage, not a cure. I was thankful that the family's honor was saved. But I feared for Lydia. I knew what sort of man Wickham was. Yet fate had been merciful. The truth of how it had all been managed came later, quietly, as kindness often comes. Aunt Gardner's letter lay upon my knees. I read it alone. She wrote that Mr. Darcy had taken everything upon himself. He had found them, paid the debts, persuaded, arranged, asked that his name be kept out of it. I read and reread, and each word altered the light within me. How to account for it? Care for Jane? A sense of duty? Justice? Or, dangerous to pronounce, care for me? Gratitude was not the only feeling. Beside it grew a quiet and perilous hope. They came first together, Mr. Bingley and Mr. Darcy. Our parlour felt crowded with Mamma's bustling solicitousness. Mr. Darcy kept a little apart, by the window, with that attentive silence in which, I now knew, there was more concern than cold. Mr. Bingley's proposal did not delay. The house filled with laughter, tears, and lists, gloves, pies, ribbons, names. Jane shone as I had longed to see her shine. In all the glad commotion I met Mr. Darcy's eyes more than once. He came with his friend. He stayed briefly. He spoke little, but in a way that made his words remain. He did not excuse himself and asked for nothing. He did not speak despite. He spoke for respect, for hope, for a future in which two people need not justify their happiness to too many. I was not ready to call it forgiveness. Indeed, it was not. Rather, my former objections had lost their voice. All that was left was to hear my own heart to the end. His aunt, Lady Catherine, came before him, to demand a promise I could not give. I listened and replied. To my surprise, I did not feel either fear or confusion. Sometimes the heart votes before the mind has counted. Strange as it may seem, her visit steadied me. If she was so disturbed, my feelings were heard by more than myself. I did not know whether he would return. When he did, and quietly asked for my hand, I said yes. Not loudly, but with the assurance of an answer long prepared. Now that Jane is happy with Mr. Bingley, now that a new music can be heard in the house, cheerful bustle, preparations for holidays, letters and visits, I often think how odd the path of life is. The road to love runs through mistakes, pride, tears, and forgiveness. Perhaps there is no true happiness without them. I look at Papa. His jokes are gentler. I listen to Mamma, and hear in her anxiety a tired tenderness. Kitty writes more sensible notes. Lydia's are as merry as ever. I answer with patience, and learn to speak to her in a way that does not instruct so much as support. Mary plays more softly. Her serious thoughts have grown warmer. The house is the same, and we are, just a little, different. In the early morning, when I wake before the rest, the house breathes evenly. I hear the kettle set below, a latch, a clink of crockery on the shelf. I walk the corridor and know, by touch alone, each board that will creak. This is my life. Not brilliant, but warm. I love my family with all their faults. I love long evenings and short walks. I love a book by the window and the smell of rain that always floats in from the fields. As for him, Mr. Darcy, I love him for teaching me to believe that true love does not dazzle so much as it clarifies. Beside him I have found a stillness in which my heart at last speaks freely.